Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'll be showing you how to make a crumb cake. Hey Sugar Spun Bakers, Sam here, and today I am so excited to be sharing another carefully tested, well-researched, and perfected recipe. While crumb cake is quite similar to coffee cake that you're probably really familiar with, it has a few subtle differences that I think you are going to really love, especially if you're a big streusel fan like I am. Today's cake has a delicate, super soft crumb and a ton of crumb topping. So let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and let's begin. Now in a large bowl, we're going to combine 1 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour with 1 cup of granulated sugar and 1/3 cup of firmly packed light brown sugar. We'll also add 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder, a half teaspoon of table salt, and 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. Now for today's recipe, you are going to want to use either a stand mixer or an electric hand mixer. I'm using my hand mixer today. And we're just going to briefly stir everything together until it's nicely combined. All right, now to get the super soft, moist, tender crumb that I wanted for today's coffee cake, we're going to do something a little bit differently. We are going to be using the reverse creaming method, which means we are going to be adding our butter into our dry ingredients instead of creaming with the sugar like you do in the traditional creaming method. Now, this technique is one of my favorites because it creates it's a tight crumb, but it's a super plush and super soft crumb. I feel like it stays soft a lot longer than the traditional creaming method does, and it's because when we add the butter this way, the butter is able to coat all of the flour particles differently. It inhibits the gluten formation and it just makes a really tender cake. Love this method. Now we have 8 tablespoons of softened butter. Mine could be a little bit more soft, but this will work. And we are going to just add 1 tablespoon of butter at a time and then use our mixer to beat that butter into the dry ingredients. Now this does take a little bit of time. If you have a stand mixer, it'll go a lot faster, but you just want to make sure that each tablespoon of butter is completely combined into the flour ingredients before you add the next tablespoon. All right, so I've added all my butter. I want you to see what this looks like. I have a mixture that resembles coarse, sandy crumbs. Now in a separate bowl, or I'm using a measuring cup because I want something with a spout, it's going to make it easier to pour this in a second. We are going to combine 1 cup of full fat sour cream. We're also going to be adding 1 large egg, as well as 1 large egg yolk. So you can just discard that white, just using the yolk. We'll also add 1 1/2 teaspoons of vanilla extract and just whisk these ingredients together until those egg yolks are nicely broken up and your mixture is really well combined. All right, now with your mixer on low speed, we are just going to gradually pour this sour cream mixture into our flour and butter mixture. I've added most of it. I'm just gonna use a spatula here now because I wanna make sure we get all of that sour cream mixture in the bowl. Now just continue to mix until you have a silky smooth batter. It'll be kind of thick, that's totally normal, but you want it to be completely smooth and lump-free. And of course, we want to use a spatula to scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl because it's important to make sure that there are no lumps hiding anywhere on the sides. We'll give this one more brief stir with our electric mixer. All right, so we are going to be baking today's recipe in a 9 by 9 inch baking pan. So I'm just going to lightly spray this with a little bit of baking spray. And I just like to use a napkin to make sure that's spread evenly over the bottom and the sides of the pan. And we'll pour this batter evenly into the pan. It is kind of a thick batter. Just use your spatula to smooth the surface. Okay, before we go any further with this, we need to prepare our crumb topping. And today's recipe does make a lot of crumb because it's a crumb cake. You're going to need a separate bowl and we're going to combine 1 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour with 2/3 cup of brown sugar. You can use light or dark brown sugar. I'm actually using a mix of 1/3 cup of each. We'll also add 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. And I also like to add a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, which technically makes this a cinnamon crumb cake. You can leave it out if you'd like, but it really adds a nice flavor. Add 1/4 teaspoon table salt. Just stir these ingredients together. And then we are going to add 1/2 cup of melted unsalted butter. We'll just drizzle that in. Make sure you get all of it in there. And then to make the crumb topping, I just like to use a fork to toss the butter and the other ingredients together. Because I want it to be nice and clumpy, usually when I have it all mixed, I'll use my hands just to press some of the pieces together and make sure I have a nice consistency that clings together really well. Now we'll just evenly scatter this over our crumb cake batter. And we'll take this over to our preheated oven where it is going to need to bake for about 45 to 50 minutes, maybe a little bit less if you are using a dark colored pan, probably a little bit longer if you're using a glass pan. And you just want to bake it until it's completely cooked through. The best way to tell that is to use the toothpick test. A toothpick inserted in the center of the cake should come out clean or preferably with a few moist crumbs, and that's how you know it's finished. Now just let this cake cool completely, and if you'd like, for that final finish, you can dust the top with a little bit of powdered sugar. Make sure you don't add the powdered sugar until it's cooled, otherwise it's just going to melt all over the surface. Okay, let's go ahead and dig in and take a look at this cake. Look at that beautiful crumb layer. I'm so excited to dig into this. And that is how you make my all-time favorite crumb cake. I really think you're going to love this one, from the super soft cake crumb to that rich, thick, crumbly crumb topping layer. I just can't wait for you to try it. If you do, please leave me a comment and let me know what you think. I always love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. So good.